Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this evening's presentation of the National Climate League national launch. We are very happy to have with us today regional organizers from Ontario and BC, as well as Richard Petty, former CEO and president of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Limited, in addition to our very own National Climate League commissioner, Kelly Quintero, and myself, the regional, the national manager for, the national campaign coordinator for Climate Reality Canada. So here today we're talking about measuring what matters. We're talking about having a good time competing across Canada with cities pushing each other towards carbon neutrality, pushing each other towards healthier cities, pushing each other towards more sustainable and more economically vibrant and resilient cities. We'd like to just recognize right now sponsorship from both the David Suzuki Foundation, who's been a huge help over the years, and Canadian National Railway, who have also provided significant assistance. We also must recognize the thousands of people across the world and the over 800 members across Canada who make Climate Reality Project what it is. And that is an organization that has enjoyed now 11 years in Canada of educating citizens about the climate crisis and its solutions. It's important that when we do this education and when we get out there in front of people, that we have goals, specific objectives that we can hang our hat on and say, that's what we're aiming for. So that's what this National Climate League is about: measuring what matters and setting goals, setting targets. As you can see behind me right now, we're just in an arena, and we have some hockey practice happening. So technical fun. As you can see here, 20 hubs across the country right now have been established. In these places, in the next 3 or 4 years, we're expecting commitments to carbon neutrality and steep reductions in emissions based on the fact that citizens recognize from the bottom up, from the grassroots, that they're going to improve their own lives while reducing their carbon pollution. With that, I'd like to quickly pass it to, I'd like to welcome two of our regional organizers with us today, Kevin Yang and Jessica McElroy, pardon me. I would like to start on the West Coast. So Jessica, would you mind just saying hello and telling us a little bit about your role helping citizens measure what matters in their communities and what makes you excited about that? You're still muted.
There we go. All right, great, wonderful to be connected. As Matthew said, I have just come on board as the regional organizer for British Columbia, and I am based in North Vancouver myself, so a suburb of the wonderful city of Vancouver. And my experience has been in renewable energy advocacy and sustainable energy development. So over the past about 15 years, I have worked to get both citizens, government at all levels, companies, industry, public and private sector moving forward on clean energy development and action. And in that time, I have witnessed that municipalities, local government and cities are really where amazing action is happening and changes are being made and leadership is taking place. And so I'm very excited to be helping groups of citizens across our great province work on pushing their municipal governments even further and making big commitments. We already have 2 municipalities in British Columbia that have made 100% renewable energy targets and commitments for their municipalities. And there's citizen groups that are pushing for other cities and communities to be added to that list. And I think we can get there. I have a scientific background, and so measuring what matters is definitely something that I believe in. Having benchmarks, having goals and targets, and knowing not only where you're starting from, but where you need to get to. So I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to work together to really make some real change and take some real action on climate change.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We also welcome Kevin Yang, based in Sault Ste. Marie and working for the Crane Institute for Sustainability. He is the regional organizer for Ontario, with the exception of the GTHA. So Kevin, please tell us a little bit about your role in supporting citizens and what you are excited about when it comes to measuring what matters.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew and Jessica. So like Matthew said, I'm going to be the new regional manager for one of the new regional managers for Ontario. And I also, like Jessica, I also have a background in science. I graduated from McMaster with a degree in Earth Environmental Sciences. And I think it's very important to measure what matters at the municipal level, because oftentimes when people talk about protecting the environment, they tend to focus on overarching climate policies. But I think municipalities definitely have a huge role to play when it comes to trying to protect the environment and trying to start climate change initiatives. And so as regional manager, I'm very excited to be supporting Ontario, and I'm very excited to see where these next months are going to take us. I think we can definitely make a huge impact here. And I'm, being in this new role here, I'm expecting to learn a lot too, and I'm just excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I'd like to pass it off to Kelly now for her to take us through just the structure of our presentation today.
Sure. Then today, welcome everyone again. And tonight we will look at the National Climate League, at the phases of the National Climate League, and that will be also the way that we're going to develop this webinar. Then we're going to start with Michael Chan, who will explain us a bit about the indicator development and that started last year. And after that, Matthew will show us details of the data collection phase that starts today and will go to the end of October. Then I will tell you about the delivery phase to arrive in November and December, with a preparation for you and with the release of the final standings 2018. That would be all for the agenda. Then
terrific. Thank you so much. I'll be sharing Michael's slides just in a quick second.
Sure.
Michael, why don't you go ahead and just launch into the development section, just mentioning.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. So our development section, so every year, obviously this is a project that we expect to be going on for every year. So between January and June, during sort of our off season, we are going to be trying to develop our indicators based on the feedback we get from the previous year, sort of what we did well and what we could do better. And in this way, we're gonna sort of be in a continuous improvement mindset, so that with each coming year, our indicators are going to be more refined and more better targeted towards what we're trying to achieve with this project. And so sort of some of the 4 criteria that we have for choosing our project include accessibility. So it talks about how accessible the data is for our citizens to get from our city officials. Compatibility across municipalities. So how generalized and how generalized this data is across cities. And so sort of each city should be able to have the same type of data. We don't want one city to have this type of data, another city not to have it. And our third criteria is for it to be a proxy for emissions. So this is what the focus of our project is, so we want each indicator to be a good proxy for sort of being able to measure emissions. And the last one is that we really do want our indicators to be meaningful to citizens. We want these to be indicators that citizens really care about and could be interested in. And this is a way to gauge interest as well. Moving on to sort of the organizations that we consulted during our project, during our consultation phase. As you can see, there are many different organizations that we reached out to, or they reached out to us. And yeah, one that I found really meaningful for us as a group was our meeting with Zero Waste Canada. There we met, we talked to Jamie and Paolo, and they sort of helped us define what we should be measuring when we talk about landfill waste. So at the beginning, we just sort of had a very general indicator like how much, what is the amount of garbage or CO2 that goes to the landfills. And they sort of told us that we should be measuring what goes to the landfills as well as sort of what gets incinerated. And in this way, they helped us refine our indicator and develop it into our final, what it is in the final standings right now. And so I'm just going to go over the indicators that we chose. The primary 15 include fuel costs, jobs and sustainability, landfill waste, green buildings, electricity usage, tree canopy cover, urban agriculture, injured active commuters, air quality, affordable housing, shared vehicles, bike lanes, EV charging stations, walkability, and public transit. So these are the 15 primary indicators that we have where we're going to be really focused on. We're going to be asking cities to actually report data on this. In addition to those, we also have 15 complementary indicators. We have 5 indicators based on emissions. These are just total emissions, industrial emissions, building emissions, transportation emissions, and waste emissions. And these indicators should be drawn directly from a city's greenhouse gas inventory. So this shouldn't be too hard to get from as long as the city is doing these inventories. In addition, we have 10 other complementary indicators, and these are going to be sort of yes/no questions that we want to pose to the city. So each of these indicators are just going to have a response that is yes, no, or in progress. And
great. Sorry, with that, we're going to transition to the second part of our agenda today, pardon me, that being the data collection. So the role of citizens is to ask for the data that they care most about. So we have 30 indicators, and you're able to choose from those indicators. I care the most about air quality and bike lanes for my children. So me as a parent in my municipality, I'm going to go to ClimateHub.ca. So I'm going to walk you through that process of how to go about asking for data to be submitted. And then we can talk about how to use that data. Kelly will be sharing a little bit more about how that data will be used as of December when it is published, the final 2018 standings. Here we are. So ClimateHub.ca is the only website that you need to know about for this initiative. And from the homepage of the website here, you'll see the benchmarking initiative, and that is the National Climate League. As a citizen here on the left-hand side, you have the opportunity to consult the preliminary standings and give us feedback on the whole process. So I see that we've already had some comments in the chat section of people that want to have their say and want to say, hey, I wish we were measuring this, or I wish we were measuring that. And that's totally fine. This initiative incorporates 30 indicators, but you as a citizen of your city, you can rally citizens, rally your peers to measure anything that you choose, really. And so we've had to boil it down to 15 primary and 15 secondary, but it does not stop you by any means from going beyond that. From this point, the preliminary standings will take you through the how and what, but in order to send templates to your municipal councillors, you will click here on the National Climate League button in the toolkit just below. From that point, you have access to a document that lets you access templates to send to your municipal councillor. So I won't get into the details right now, but you can see in the process section here, it's a one-page document that lays everything out step by step. And when you click on the template button, it allows you to copy, paste, and send to your municipal councillor in a matter of 5 or 10 minutes. And that's what we are equipping every citizen across the country, whether or not you are in a hub city or not. If you are in a city that doesn't yet have a hub that is active, you're more than welcome to use the same templates, have the same data submitted, and as Kelly will get to shortly, it will be available in the open database alongside all of the data submitted by our hub cities. So with that said, from the perspective of a municipal councillor, the data part of this equation, which begins today and finishes at the end of October. So it's important to note we are collecting data for the next 2.5 months, at which point we will close the data portal to new submissions and begin analyzing the data and preparing the report for December. So data will still be allowed to be submitted, but we will not include it in the final report if it is submitted after the 31st. But the open data portal will include all data that continues rolling in afterwards. As a municipal official, I receive an email from my voters, and they say, hey, I'd like to know how many kilometers of bike lanes were installed last year. And as a municipal councillor, I don't know the answer to that question. So I ask my staff. My staff says, sure, that was in the report that we submitted here or there. And they would click this button here, submit data, and they would be brought to this form, which allows them to submit data to the open database and consult the open database. So if you don't know if somebody else in your city has already submitted data on bike lanes, then you can verify before asking. An important piece of this is, of course, the methodology for each indicator, which is detailed and available here at the top of this form. The methodology describes exactly how to calculate the indicator given and provides links to external resources if the municipal staff need to consult them. Finally, I should mention one of the final documents that's available here, a good deal of work went into it, is the rationale document, which describes and tries to address a lot of the comments that we received through the consultation process of, hey, why don't you include this? Or why is this included but not that? Or why don't you measure this differently? And we spent a good 6 months wrestling with those questions, and some of the rationale for why we ended up on the 30 indicators that we did, 15 primary, 15 secondary, is included in that rationale document. So there you are, back to your home base here, the National Climate League in the benchmarking section of ClimateHub.ca, where you have access as citizens to resources here and here to get active and get participating in the Climate League, and as municipal councillors and municipal officials over here. And I would just like to note that feedback is always welcome. We always need it. And if you would like to submit ideas for the next year's league, 2019 standings, you're more than welcome to do so. And we will be taking those into consideration starting in January. So that's all for the data section. At that point, I will pass it off to Kelly.
Great, thanks. Well, after the data collection phase finishes in October 31st, we'll go to the delivery phase. But it has also a first moment that is the data visualization by cities and towns that will be competing in the National Climate League. We will provide some, along to some industry experts that will tell you how the local data to produce visual pieces that appeal general public and tell a story pertinent for local needs. As we will be working with the national data to create these national standards, cities and towns will be working in creating stories and data visualization for their local needs. We will work with data from all cities, and you will visualize mainly data from your city. However, every city and town can access the open database and draw from there whatever they think is necessary to better tell the story, the local story. So they can compare themselves, for example, with cities or towns that are their same size, that have their equal economic activities, for example. So that open database is going to be available for everyone to enrich their local stories. Then we will also, during this November, we will have a media training. We will provide media training by getting industry experts again to tell cities and towns about contacting local media, the best way to do it, and how to use different channels such as social media or mass media to be more effective in the spreading of the data or the final infographic, charts, stories. For these two moments, we will provide also a list of online tools, free online tools for every city participating to be able to create charts and infographics. And also our partner, the Climate Stories Project, will be providing information about how to turn a story into a shareable work of journalism. Then we will, I would like to show you, I don't know, Matt, if there is something available to show them how to access these open database, or I just tell them how to do it?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I can show you.
Okay. Then you just have to go to ClimateHub.ca and go to the benchmarking section, the same that Matthew was showing you a moment ago. And I think I'll share my, okay. Yes. There's something on the, thank you. Then you just go to the right section, and at the end of the paragraph, you can see the view submitted data. You just click on there, and you will be able to see the data submitted by every city and every town. Then you can use this data for your local needs purposes to tell your story, and this data will appear there in real time. And you will have access to it from tomorrow till the end of the National Climate League.
It's important to note that the two data points there submitted by Wayne Gretzky and Carey Price are in fact fictitious data points.
But that's the way that it is going to look from tomorrow. And that is all about the open database also. And as a closing of this delivery phase, of course, we are going to deliver the standings in December during COP24. And those standings, there's a sample of those standings also in the website, where you can see how these final standings are going to be distributed and what are we going to tell and how every indicator is going to look. We're going basically to show the comparison between cities and also examples of best practices in Canada and at an international level. And some experts from the industry will tell you why that indicator is important to tell something about quality of life, and also to tell a story about reducing emissions.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Now I have a few questions for our very special guest, Richard Petty, founder of forabettertoronto.org. Am I going to get that right? Is it .org, Richard?
For Better Toronto.
forabettertoronto.
CA.
There we go.
I can't.
Okay. Okay. I'll, if you just type it without the last couple of the .com or the .ca, it'll pop up. And of course,
shows up first on the search.
Yes, yes, and of course, former CEO and president of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, prior to a storied career in marketing throughout kind of the fast-moving consumer goods space. So I have a couple of questions for Richard right now about what made him kind of jump from the sports space into the sustainable city space and the passionate city builder that he is today. And as I'm asking these questions, I would welcome you to begin submitting questions in the Q&A box in the chat window. So either of those options are open to you. We also received 5 or 6 questions from the registrants prior to the webinar, so I'll be working through those with our speakers today immediately following my little interview with Mr. Petty. So Richard, thank you so much for joining us. It is great to have you here.
Okay, well, Matt, it's a pleasure. You know, for this event, you can see me. I'm wearing a Climate is Science T-shirt that I bought at Science March in Washington. And it was a very special day, and I bought this. It says I have the T-shirt, and from course about a year ago now. So I'm delighted to be on this show. So you know, I worked in as president of 6 companies. Did not give a lot of thought to the community in 5 of the companies. You know, I think it was a good president. Community wasn't something that was really. And before I left, a really good book, former dean Roger Martin. It was called Fixing the Game, and he used the NFL as a potential model for straightening out Wall Street. I didn't get any of that, but he had used a metaphor in the book that really stuck with me, that all leaders and all companies have 3 choices in society. They can take for here. You can take bricks away, or you can add bricks to the community. If you think about, you might think about what the progressive conservatives are doing in Ontario right now. If you think about taking bricks away, you can think about what the EPA is doing in the United States right now. So I really believe in when I was at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, we are a vision and values company, and one of our values was to be leaders in the community. And that was the first time that I focused on that for 14 years. And we did that by having a foundation that encouraged youth in recreation and sports. And more importantly, we built a $1 billion infrastructure in the city. BMO Field, Maple Leaf Square, Air Canada Centre, which is now Stink Arena. That was enough to invest in the community. And unlike most pro sports teams, we did it with 95% of our. They take money away from cities or states or provinces to fund their things, and we did that. So you know, that was a switch. That, you know, yes, I was a businessman, but then I really realized that I had a role to play as a city builder as well.
Thank you so much, Richard. The second question that I wanted to kind of bring to our audience's attention is what can municipalities do? Municipalities have a challenge ahead of them really in this transition. They've got to get people excited about something that isn't typically exciting, you know, like making buildings more efficient or making, you know, transit move more smoothly. There are things that change our lives significantly. They have a big impact on our quality of life if it takes us 30 minutes to get to work, or if it takes us, you know, an hour and 45 minutes in traffic. But how do we get people to get excited about changing their city, transforming their city, reimagining their city, like they get excited about, you know, the puck crossing the line? What can municipalities learn from the NHL in terms of creating that kind of fervor, that excitement?
Well, if I get a real around for, I think, 101 years right now, you know, Lord Stanley's Cup. I read a headline today that was talking, in 9 years ago, the coal was linked to creating climate change. So climate change has been around as long as the NHL, but it doesn't have the same awareness, same belief. We still have our deniers. We have the people that don't have a point of view on it. So, the NHL has got a real big leg on us. But, there is lessons to be learned from that. I can tell you the NHL today, it understands that it's coming from frozen ponds. And they've done more change. I've been retired from 6 years from working in the NHL and the NBA, but they're really starting to catch on to it, and because they have to. So I like that. So I like your idea of a national climate league. Pretty catchy. And I like that 20 communities in it. Interestingly, 10 are west of Winnipeg, 10 are east of Winnipeg. Nice lineup. Really lends itself to competition. And the NHL has built its fan over the years. It's going to take some time to do. It's not, we've got to do it with passion and energy and enthusiasm. It won't be the same. We're not going to be doing this because it's we're going out and it's thrilling. It's just very important. But I do think that using the hockey analogy is a good one. If you have all the 20 communities compete against each other, it's the ultimate meritocracy. I don't know if we've thought about having a National Climate Cup. Each year they present the Stanley Cup. It's a great presentation. You can talk about that. Then there's also all kinds of other trophies like the Vezina Trophy and all of those. The Rock Trophy. There's recognition for cities that don't necessarily do the whole package of things they need to do, but they do a couple things really well. So I think it's really good that you're using this example. But the other thing it takes is champions. I met, I think I told Matt this, I met with the mayor of Toronto back in late February, and I talked to him about a lot of things, but the number one thing that I brought up was climate change. And I really challenged him because I'm watching the great mayors of the city, the mayor of Paris, the mayor of New York, the mayor of London. They're champions of climate change, and I challenged him to be a champion. And I'm afraid I don't see him being the champion we need, but maybe this will, we just got picked as the 7th most livable city in the world again. Everyone loves those type of awards. Maybe winning this will make him a champion too.
Thanks so much. And the final question that we wanted to address with you today is measuring what matters. What do you think in terms of data tracking? Which of the numbers that we're going to be measuring do you get the most excited about? Where do you think we're going to have the most political influence? Is it going to be air quality? Is it going to be time and traffic? What's it going to be?
I don't know that I can answer that, but I'm a great believer in what gets measured gets done. People would say what doesn't get measured doesn't get done too. So I really applaud that you've got all these measurements. A shameless plug here. I have a book on 21 leadership lessons, and my 13th lesson in the book is what gets measured gets done. So I think you're on the right track. All companies are using measurement today. Analytics are bigger than ever. It was baseball, 15 years ago, Billy Beane and in cybermetrics. In the NBA, the general manager of the Houston Rockets is huge on analytics. So I think it's important that we do that. Again, we're not going to beat this unless we're measuring to see if there's progress. The only thing I worry about, Matt, is you've got so many, and I was listening to people inputting and how they're going to input and how we're going to collect this data. I really think it's important that somehow we be able to simply put them together. And back to that NHL analogy again, that we can say, Vancouver's in first place, Toronto's in fourth place. We can wrap it up in something that's warrants a press release. We get picked up that every couple of weeks, the new numbers from the National Climate League Climate Reality says, you know, Toronto's in 5th place and Burnaby's doing a better job or whatever. Winnipeg's doing a better job. So I think there's lots of good measurements there. I know that there's other ones people are suggesting. I would just say somehow you can drill it down to make it something really simple. And I'm not sure what that is. The one I'm really watching is the emissions one. But I know there's other ones I'm great on, you know, I'm going to bike a long distance tomorrow. You know, I plant trees on my property like crazy. There's so many things. I walk everywhere. I drive green cars. Both my cars completely green. You know, there's a lot of measurements out there, good ones. But if we could find it all, the way to drill it down so we can have 1st place, 2nd place, you know, the East versus the West type thing, I think would be great.
Terrific. I see a lot of potential here, and I love the idea of the National Climate League Cup. Certainly on our webinar, or on our kind of where we finish this in December, will be during COP24. So it'll be an international moment to talk about climate, and we're hoping that every year during that December international conference, we'll be able to talk about municipalities taking action. But maybe we can go, you know, at the next step and have press releases happening even more frequently, and getting it into the news on a regular basis. Certainly at the local level, that will be the case. So when citizens are, you know, drawing data and want to make a point, if something happened recently that's really politically relevant, they can pull data from this open database and say, hey, look, you know, this other city is doing something about that. What are you doing? What are we doing? What can we do? What can we learn from the businesses in Burnaby, or what can we learn from the municipal council in Halifax? So yeah, very excited to move forward with this. Again, we do have a few questions that were submitted prior to, so I'm going to move into the questions from the audience now. You guys are more than welcome to ask Richard questions about his experience and how he's transitioned to become a passionate city builder, as well as technical questions about the National Climate League and about where we're going from here. So I'll open it up with a couple of questions from the registration forms. Melanie from Peterborough, Ontario. How can we leverage the Ontario government to create a progressive conservative branded price on carbon as opposed to fighting against the federal plan? And this really speaks to why the National Climate League exists. For many years, we've been focused on trying to influence federal policy, you know, trying to influence provincial policy, environmental organizations, activists. We focus on kind of like the big fish. And we forget that citizens on the ground need to understand the value in reducing emissions. How does a city look like where everybody cycles and walks and takes transit? Well, it looks like a city without parking lots. It looks like a city with a lot more green. It looks like a city where you can breathe easy and you can send your kids, you know, to walk across the street because it's safe. So I think we need to tell that story better to the local grassroots, to municipal citizens, and they're going to then say, well, you know, it's not such a big deal pricing carbon because I actually like the things that the carbon price lets the government purchase. The carbon price lets the government put in transit. The carbon price lets the government prioritize the things that are making my life better, and those are reflected in the 15 primary indicators. So with that said, moving on to question number 2, Sandra in Toronto. What are we doing about the fact that the federal government is totally AWOL? And I mean, it's true. We've seen the federal Liberals, unfortunately, with Kinder Morgan, and then most recently with Kitimat, approving a liquid natural gas export plant to the tune of $40 billion. That's not chump change. That's huge. And it's important to recognize that that is an investment in a technology that is a sunset technology. Basically, between now and 40 years from now, natural gas is going to have to peter out, just like coal and oil. So the question of investing in those industries kind of comes back to the same bottom up. If citizens believe that they would rather have jobs in renewable technologies, then we will see the government responding to those requests. So we're trying to build that bottom up grassroots understanding that there's a better economy waiting for us. There are other countries out there that are demonstrating how to do it. And part of the National Climate League standings that will be published in December will be a feature for each of the 15 primary indicators. Which city in the world is leading on this indicator? And that'll allow us to say, okay, well, Canada, here's kind of where the chips fall, but who internationally can we learn from? And it just so happens that the walkability indicator that we featured in our first preliminary standings, we pulled the data from the walkability walk score website, and New York City, most walkable city in the world. So what can we learn from them? What have they done in the last few years to reduce traffic accidents, to make the city more friendly for active commuters, senior citizens, and children on the streets? Question from Fernando out in Victoria. How can we promote neighboring municipalities to work together on climate? Right? So how do we get municipalities talking to each other? And I'm tempted to, the easy answer is get enough people helping them do it. If you sit down in front of your municipal councilor and you say, I'm going to help you do this, and you've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people with you, and we call that a climate hub in climate reality terminology. If you've got a network of people that are willing to come alongside municipal councilors, come alongside municipal staff and say, help us help you, then that's gonna open up doors to them that they didn't have open, because they're all budgetarily constrained. Austerity measures, cutbacks are nothing new. They've been going on for a long time. And with this urgency of this issue, citizens need to step up and say, hey, listen, I'm willing to get involved. I'm willing to play the game of the National Climate League, offer my help. I know how to write a press release. I know how to design a website. So I'm going to help the city maybe engage a segment of the population that they weren't able to engage previously. Maybe it's somebody that I resemble. Great. So anybody else on the call, Jessica, Michael, Kevin, Kelly, or Richard, want to respond to that? I mean, how would you encourage neighboring municipalities to work together on climate change?
Matt, you're asking the group of us? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, panelists. Yeah. So there's a question to the panelists there.
You know, one of the things I do like about C40 cities is they get the mayors together. And, Toronto is a signature to the Paris Accord. They're a member of the C40 cities. But, our mayor never goes. And, I pushed them. I said, why don't you go? I mean, to these, because they're sharing best practices all the time. How do we somehow we get awareness of what you're doing here, the National Climate League, and you're handing out a trophy, and is an evolution of that is at some point do those 20 mayors get together?
Excellent. Yeah, we did consult with C40 in the development of our indicators. We love what they're doing around the carbon budget, the deadline 2020, whereby 2020, every city needs to peak their emissions in the developed world, and by 2025, they need to peak their emissions in the developing world, and then not only set a target way off in the future to achieve big reductions, but also year by year by year. This year it's going to be at 3%. This year, the year after, it's going to be 3. It's going to be 3. It's going to be 3, and moving really in a very steep reduction. And another piece that our next question will be happy to hear about is that C40 is also moving towards consumption-based accounting, which means that's the next frontier. It goes beyond just lighting gasoline on fire, or heating your home with natural gas or electricity from coal, but rather to what comes into your house that you consume. That is a topic that the mayor of Edmonton has really put forward on the international stage, and the Edmonton Declaration that was signed in March by a number of international cities address that. So that'll begin taking into consideration things like diet, things like imported goods from elsewhere in the world that use dirty energy to produce them, that will start being counted as part of my bill. Right now, that's on somebody else's bill. And so that's an exciting. I'm going to ask Kelly, because I know she's very well acquainted with the diet question. Would you like to answer Kimri's question?
Yes, sure. Well, I think what we have to make for cities and towns to work on these issues, to make evident how it impacts the emissions and how we are losing opportunities to develop some other stuff, just giving a space, for example, for ranching, as you're saying. Then the best would be also linked as we are trying to do with this initiative. It's not just talk about emissions or just talk about the animals, because it's evident that many people choose, for example, a vegetarian or a plant-based diet because of empathy with animals. But the key is to make the proper links of this subject with many different others to capture the attention of different audiences. Then we have to highlight that it is better for health, that it is better for the planet, that it has a lot to do with emissions. And if it has to do a lot with emissions, it means that it is costing the city or the town money, because we are entering a phase where adaptation has to be cost a lot. Then the idea of including this subject in different initiatives is linking it with other different aspects, and that's quite what we want to do in the National Climate League, having different categories and many different kinds of indicators, all in the same initiative.
Thank you very much, Kelly. And I'd also just like to note for Kim on the line that the reason that the dietary indicator was not a primary indicator is because the cities themselves don't have a huge lever of power on people's personal choices. So the criteria for the indicators that we did choose to include as primary were predominantly those that the government had a lever on. So they do, in terms of a municipal government, they can choose to have their community centers and have their cafeterias and et cetera serve, plant-based meals. Certainly, at the very least, provide vegan options everywhere. And that's what we've decided to focus on, because we can't expect municipalities to change the diets of their citizens necessarily. Maybe there are some policy solutions that we're overlooking, but that's part of the reason. So happy to continue that conversation. Going to go back to one of the registration link questions, and that being Kaylee from Toronto. How can we get businesses to mandate non-single-use plastics, no more styrofoam containers, sustainable sourcing of their products? So, I mean, that's a question for predominantly, I think, provincial and federal governments to address. Although many cities have decided to ban the plastic bag, Montreal among them, recently stopped allowing commerce to provide plastic bags of a certain thickness. So municipalities do have a role there. And the only way that the National Climate League addresses that role is through the waste management indicator, which is how many tons of waste or how many kilograms of waste per household go to either the incinerator or the dump every year. So we are able to track who's really not doing very well with that regard. And then by comparison between who's really leading on that issue, we're going to be able to find policy solutions in those cities that help reduce waste. And I don't think it's a surprise to think those solutions are going to be things like banning plastic bags and requiring restaurants to use recyclable takeout containers, for example. All of those things are possible, and I know my expectation is when we write the paragraph for the city in the world that's leading on that issue, I think San Francisco is one of the really avant-garde cities in that respect. We have another question here from Fernando, a final question from Johan, and then if there are no others that come in before the end, we will call it a day and thank everybody for joining us. So a follow-up for Fernando's question. Greater Victoria area is divided into 13 municipalities, each of them having approximately 27,000 people on average. And the hub is made from people from many of those municipalities. So we have a number of municipalities represented by one hub. So how do we push for good data collection in such a confusing place? That's going to be a very interesting question for people in the Halton region, people in the Peterborough region, people in the Montreal region, because the island of Montreal, one island is divided into 10 or 11 municipalities itself. So the answer is not easy. The answer is where you have capacity, act. If there is a regional government, then maybe your efforts are best used focusing on the regional government. If they collect data on some of the indicators that we've addressed at the regional level, then you're most welcome to collect that data at the regional level. It means that we won't be able to compare you apples to apples with other municipalities, but that's not the end of the world. You can still compare yourself year over year, which is really the most important thing, as any athlete will tell you. Everybody has their own limitations. Everybody has their own reality. No two municipalities are alike, but the municipality can measure its progress year over year. So what the National Climate League is hoping to do is to equip and encourage citizens to begin measuring that progress internally year over year in their municipalities. And a bonus would be to compare your municipalities to others. So that's a question that we can continue exploring, Fernando, as this initiative matures. This is the first year, so yeah, there's going to be a lot of complications that we don't have easy answers for in the short term. But maybe eventually we can end up comparing you to other cities with similar kind of regional agglomeration councils. So Johan, and finally Kim, and then we'll cut it off there so that we can finish right up at 8 p.m. The city of Ghent in Belgium, this is Johan's question, offers in all public restaurants, hospitals, schools, etc., a weekly Thursday vegetarian day. They made the agreements with private restaurants to do the same. So there's a great example, not a question, but rather an example of a solution that could be implemented elsewhere. And that's it would be interesting to know whether that's voluntary on behalf of the restaurants and schools and hospitals, or whether it's mandated by law, and whether the municipality has the power to enact that kind of law. I think in Canada, I would expect municipalities not to have that kind of power, but they can certainly lead by example, which is what our secondary indicator on dietary choices is about, leading by example in their own facilities. And then they can, drive prices down for sustainable producers that produce good vegan meals, things like that, which can attract other customers to those producers. And finally, before we sign off for the night, Kim in Edmonton asks, how about measuring waste generated at city organized events, festivals, etc.? So that's a great point. Now, any question about measuring something new that isn't already in our indicators, the answer that we have is yes, go for it. However, we can't measure, again, as Richard said, we've already got 30 indicators. We can't go to more than that realistically. But cities, if you have citizens that are passionate about following up on that indicator, and that's the delivery part that Kelly addressed earlier. When it comes to taking the data that you've collected and then doing something with it, acting on that data, running a campaign, pushing City Hall to be better, learning from other municipalities that are doing innovative things, that's when we're going to see things change, not simply collecting the data. Transparency is great, but if we close our eyes, then it doesn't matter how much information we have. We need to open our eyes, digest that information, and deliver it to our fellow citizens, and and push each other to be better. So with that, we are at the top of the hour. A quick question or comment, I suppose, that Rashika added there. So if you'd like to take a screenshot of her answer to your question, Johan, then you can do so. I will as well. And if you'd like to stay in touch, we encourage you to visit ClimateHub.ca, sign up for a Climate Hub in your area. If there's not one there yet, start pulling friends together, and we'd be really happy to help you pull voices in your community together to focus on transformational solutions. Quick example, in Montreal, we're pushing for a climate test on every major transportation and infrastructure decision. We're pushing for a climate budget to be implemented at City Hall so that they measure carbon just like they measure dollars and cents. and we're pushing for annual emissions inventories so that we get data on an annual basis and we're able to track progress. So with that, we'll bid you a wonderful evening. I would like to thank all of our panelists, Jessica out in North Vancouver, Michael in Toronto, Kevin in Sault Ste. Marie, Richard in Windsor, Kelly here in Montreal with me. And thank you very much all for joining us. It was a pleasure, and looking forward to seeing you in our upcoming webinar series that will span the fall session that will be announced next week. And we're looking forward to having you join us for some of those as well.
Thanks, Matt.